didn't expect it, but we are here nonetheless. The Pitt Panthers have continued a trek of potentially a special season, managing to get over a hiccup earlier in the year and now turn it around to what could be an ACC title. I don't know if anyone expected that before the season, but that is very much a possibility for the Pitt Panthers as Pitt heads into a big game, to say the very least, biggest game of the year, biggest game in a while for Pitt at home, Heinz Field, not game day, but still a big game for Pitt against Clemson, the normal top dog of the ACC. And to preview this big game for the Pitt Panthers, I'm Mike Asti here with Pittsburgh Sports Live and Pittsburgh Sports Now, and I am going to be joined by Eric Mac Lain, who is a former Clemson captain and a college football analyst with the ACC Network and ESPN. So, Eric, first off, thanks for joining me. I see your captain jersey there behind you. So that already gives you a resume. And I also saw you released mid-season picks and your thoughts to this point earlier in the day. So I'm happy to get that to our fans. But thanks for joining me, man.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for having me, man. It's going to be exciting jumping this matchup this afternoon that we're going to have on Saturday, and really just, man, a loaded game that I'm super excited to see, and really the biggest test for, Clemson offensively, and then same for Pitt going against this Clemson defense.
Yeah. Imagine a scenario where Pitt hosts Clemson and Pitt is the ranked team. Pitt is the favored team, and Pitt is the team that people are predicting to win this game and are kind of all over right now. Normally the case for Clemson, it's been a little different of a year for Clemson, already having those conference losses and not right now in any way in a driver's seat. Pitt, despite that early season loss to Western Michigan, is in a driver's seat in conference, certainly in the Coastal. And that's one of those that I'm sure Pitt fans still can't get out of their craw. And depending on how this year finishes, are going to look back on and say, oh, why didn't we do it then? But I do want to get your thoughts on Pitt in general heading into this game. What are your thoughts about this Pitt team to this point? Obviously, that was a game the Pitt defense didn't show up, and the Pitt defense let down the Pitt offense. Kenny Pickett threw 6 touchdowns, tied a single game record. Not much more you can ask for him in that game. That's a MAC team. They've lost a couple times. They score, but that's a bad loss for Pitt. Outside of that, they've been pretty dominant offensively. They've done it against major conference teams. They went on the road and beat Tennessee in a tough place to play. That's an understatement based on what Ole Miss dealt with. It's a tough place to play and get a victory. And Pitt is coming off now some conference wins where they're actually able to do it against conference foes. The defense looks better now. What are your thoughts of Pitt? How good is Pitt? And do they deserve the respect that Pat Narduzzi, their head coach, continuously is calling for? They slid into their AP rankings this week, but he thought they were disrespected by not even being there a week earlier.
Yeah, man, I think this is clearly the best offense in the ACC. I mean, these guys are firing on all cylinders. It's been really fun to see, the development of Kenny Pickett, a guy who coming into this season, I remember just reading, these publications and various ones that said, Kenny kind of is who he is. How can he possibly get better in a 5th year? And just reading that, I was like, hold on, let's pump the brakes. He's just going into his 3rd year in this offense, and really as the leader and kind of commanding chief of this team. And I just remember back, going into my 3rd year in the same offense, how much better understanding I had, how much better of a grasp of the offense that I had. And I said, I definitely didn't think he'd be doing what he is, but I definitely thought he would be better. And man, it's just incredible to see, how well he's playing. His development has really been very impressive. His pocket awareness, his internal clock of saying, all right, time to go, is super impressive. How he extends plays with his leg just to fire it downfield, I think is what really just separates him from a lot of quarterbacks. And we saw in that Georgia Tech game, just destroying these guys. I mean, for 2 weeks, Georgia Tech's defense looked really solid, and Kenny just picked them apart.
Yeah. You just ask Clemson. Just ask Clemson about Georgia Tech's defense. Right.
Exactly. Well, I don't know if you can compare that. That offense is quite stagnant. But
we'll
North
get there.
Carolina, maybe. North Carolina and Sam Howell, maybe.
Sure.
But looking at those guys, it's been really impressive to see Kenny and just how he's playing. And overall, this team getting better. I mean, the defense waking up and really putting on a good performance against Virginia Tech and the run game. slowly coming into its own. The way that Pitt finished that game, just really dominating the clock, dominating the fourth quarter, not necessarily scoring points, but did whatever they wanted, was really impressive to see. This Pitt team is in a good place right now.
Yeah, they absolutely are in a good place, and they right now are in a driver's seat to the Coastal. And then once they get there in the ACC title game, if they would get there, certainly looking like probably favored in every game the rest of this season, and maybe even favored there. Wake Forest right now looks to be the team that they would face there. A little different of a season with Clemson, not that top dog. Speaking here with Eric Mac Lain, who is a former Clemson captain, as you can see with the jersey behind him, and also a college football analyst with the ACC Network and ESPN. Now, Eric, obviously Kenny Pickett is the story here, and we'll get to the rest of the Pitt team here in a second as well, because they have emerged with a running game. They have emerged with a little bit of a defense. You need more than just Pickett to win games and have a really special year and win a conference. We've now seen them put that together. We'll see if that continues. We know Pickett's going to, though. I think the confidence now is Pickett's going to show up every single game. He's really become the leader of this team. Yes, he now has some continuity with an offensive coordinator that's been there a while. Kenny Pickett's had to silence some doubters. Even Pitt fans weren't supportive of Pickett years ago. Mark Whipple's had to silence some doubters. Pat Narduzzi silencing doubters. That's the theme right now of Pitt at this point in the year, but it's all driven by Pickett. If Pickett wasn't back, if Pickett wasn't doing this, Pitt would not be in this situation right now. I think everybody at Pitt would agree with that. But Pickett, honestly, if you just look at the numbers, is having the single best season for any college quarterback this year. And that's crazy to say. It's one thing to say he would get better this year by coming back, but to say he's actually having the best year in college football, that's crazy to me. People are talking about the NFL draft. I've seen legit NFL people out there, legit NFL experts, analysts, etc., saying Kenny Pickett could be a first-round pick, maybe even more so. I saw a wild one throwing him out there first overall, which, yeah, he's putting up the numbers this year, but nobody would have said that even a year ago. So what has Kenny Pickett done to be so much better? And does he legitimately deserve more national recognition, Heisman candidacy? Is it actually possible he could be a Heisman candidate at Pitt despite the loss if this keeps up? And how much better is Kenny Pickett now than what you've seen from him in prior years at Pitt?
Yeah, man. Well, it doesn't even look like the same guy. It really doesn't. I mean, just his control, his ownership, his understanding of the offense. It's very impressive to see how methodical he can go 1, 2, 3 check down if he needs to.
Yeah,
it's incredible. And we're just watching his eyes. I wish that, in college, it's so various and different of what kind of camera crew and how many cameras you're going to get with the NFL. They have these ISO cams and you can really see where a quarterback's looking. I wish that we had some type of ISO cam on Kenny's eyes, because it's amazing to see how quickly he goes through his progressions. And now he's getting a lot of help. His cast of characters that he has to throw to is tremendous. Jordan Addison, I think, is one of the best in the country. Lucas Kroll has finally taken that step. He was banged up a year ago as one of the best tight ends in the country. And then Taysir Mack and others are really just doing their part, all the while having this veteran offensive line give them all the time in the world. I mean, it's just a collective perfect storm in a positive way that Kenny's able to get better and take these steps forward. So it's impressive to see. And I think those NFL chirps, if you wish, the things that you hear are true. I don't think there's any question. And if he has a big day against Clemson, I'm talking 300 plus, 3 or 4 touchdowns. Hello Heisman, hello first round of the NFL draft. I think those conversations need to be more legitimate and on a much wider scale than just the ACC network and various Pittsburgh coverage. I think this guy's for real, and he has a great opportunity to prove it this weekend.
Yeah, and honestly, 3-4 touchdowns, 300 some yards wouldn't even be his best game of the season.
Exactly.
I mean, that's how consistent he's been to this point. And yeah, that one loss does sting because it was 6 touchdowns from Kenny Pickett. So it was the defense that let them down in that game. But Pitt, nonetheless, at 5-1, nonetheless undefeated in conference play, nonetheless right now looking like a coastal championship at minimum, if not more, in the ACC. And even in a down year for the conference, this is still a remarkable year for Kenny Pickett. So coming back has really not only helped this team and program, but made him some money, no doubt. This is one of the better turnaround stories for a player to come back and really become the leader of men, quiet the doubters, and then become what could potentially be a pro quarterback. I don't think 2 years ago anyone thought an NFL chance was going to happen, even if he turned his college career around. I think even a year ago, people thought maybe he'd hold a clipboard in the NFL. If you're a first-round pick, obviously that franchise thinks you're holding more than a clipboard, or else they're not going to pay you that money. So, so it's really been about these last 5 or 6 weeks, and he does have to keep it up, though, obviously. And doing it against Clemson, even if they're a little down from what they were, would be a big deal in national TV. Now, is Pitt overall, though, good enough to be a legitimate ACC champion where people aren't going to just say, well, that's because the conference down? Are they good enough that if they would continue this streak and they would win these games, they should win? They're likely favored in most of these games the rest of the year with some teams down that they're going to face and then some weaker opponents at the end of the season, that they would legitimately deserve a New Year's Six bowl and then maybe beyond. Obviously, I don't think anyone thought that would be a conversation either before the year, but with everyone losing, what is the ceiling for this Pitt team and how legitimately good are they? Or is that still remaining to be seen? And do they still need to prove it against a Clemson, against these teams? Because we have seen recent years from Pitt, they got to a certain point and then the big game, they collapsed. And then, of course, no one's going to remember them as anything but a team that didn't do enough.
Right. And you know, I think for starters with that, and you know, just because the superpower is down, I don't know if we can give the whole ACC and say that they're down. Clemson 4-2, Pitt 5-1, Wake 6-0, Virginia 5-2, NC State 5-1. I mean, we have these solid teams that are playing, you know, at a very high level, and it just happens that the breadwinner, the thoroughbred, Clemson is taking a back seat. No, by the way, who they lose to? The number one clear-cut team in the country and another ranked team in NC State who's playing very, very well. So I think no one is going to be taking credit saying, oh, Pitt won it when it was a down year. I don't think this is a down year. I think they're playing against really tough competition, especially on the Atlantic side, whoever they have to play, whether it be Clemson, whether it be Wake Forest or NC State. It's going to be a tough matchup. It's going to be something that they go earn. They're not just, you know, handed this ACC, you know, title. So I think it's going to be interesting to see. I think they are legitimate enough. I think they're a very good collective team. The weird thing is how this team is kind of flipped. A team that we are normally used to seeing crazy defenses come from, the sack production, and that just quite hasn't been there yet. But I think they're figuring it out. I think they're turning it up. You know, they lost key, I know you know this, key players. I mean, so many great leaders from a year ago, especially on that defensive line and the safety position that, you know, sets the defense essentially. So they're having to figure out who they are, get back to, you know, kind of Pitt football, but they've got a great opportunity this weekend against Clemson to, you know, statistically have some great numbers against these guys.
Yeah, and Pitt being favored in games is, I'm sure, going to make some Pitt fans roll their eyes because Pitt has been favored in games before and has lost those games. Pitt did lose to Western Michigan earlier in the year, even with Miami losing games they shouldn't lose, and teams like that remaining on the schedule, feeling like they're going to be inferior to Pitt. There's talent there. There's recruiting talent there. It's the same thing Pat Narduzzi, I'm sure, is telling Pitt about Clemson. Hey, yeah, they lost a couple of times. Yeah, they lost once in conference, but that's 5-star recruits all over the field. They could easily turn it on and embarrass you, so you got to make sure you're aware. It is interesting how the season has gone. With 3 weeks ago, Pitt fans wanted Pat Narduzzi fired. Mark Whipple was a scapegoat for many. Kenny Pickett's continued the train and maybe saved some people's jobs here. And yeah, it's been a weird Pitt team though, because Pat Narduzzi, also being a defensive guy, brought in for his defensive prowess. The defense has certainly not carried the day for Pitt this year, responsible for the only loss. It's been a weird season, but not one Pitt can complain about right now at 5-1. Eric Mac Lain joining me here, former Clemson captain, analyst with the ACC Network and ESPN here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and Pittsburgh Sports Now. Now, Eric, this game against Clemson obviously is a big deal. Everything you're saying, Pitt needs to prove to the top dog, even if they're favored, even if they're at home, and even if they're ranked, and even if they have the blank slate in the conference and they're a division leader, and that's not the case for Clemson. Clemson could easily turn around and beat them. I don't think anyone would be shell-shocked. And if they do, then you're going to have people saying, well, Eric, Pitt's good. but they're not great. And they just lost to a down Clemson team because of the talent disparity. So what is the key for Pitt in this game against Clemson? What does Pitt have to do to defeat Clemson, aside from the obvious kind of continuing the offensive prowess and Kenny Pickett doing what he's been doing, even though he hasn't had those games against Clemson in recent years? But what are the keys for Pitt to defeat this Clemson team? Still a very, very talented team, despite a little lesser than in recent years.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is going to be protecting Kenny. And we've seen Pitt do an unbelievable job of that. They're right at about number 2 in the conference, I believe, with 9 sacks, tied for second there. Have done a great job and just let Kenny produce. But when you go back and you watch that Virginia Tech tape, Pitt struggled a little bit against the games and the twists and stunts that VT ran. Clemson's a much better defense that you're going to see. And like I said, the best defense that you played against, they're going to be confident in their calls. They're going to be confident in their games. So what does that do to Kenny if he has to run for his life? Now, we've seen him be very effective on the run, but he's been able to keep his eyes up. If his eyes are down and, looking at Skowski chase him from behind or Trenton Simpson, he's not going to be super comfortable. So if,
right,
Pitt does not protect him, I think that could be a really interesting, kind of game changer. And then running the ball effectively when you need it. At the end of the day, Pitt wants to throw it. They want to throw it 40 plus times a game. They're not super interested in running the ball, but when you have to have it,
right,
you've got to go and get it. And they have been able to do that. But this is a beast coming in here. And this is a Clemson defense that is very good at stopping the run, unless your name's Sean Tucker. They've been able to prevent that all season long. So can they do that? Can Pitt establish a little bit of balance, maybe a 70-30 type balance, not 50-50, and just keep Clemson from guessing? Because I think when you're so one-sided, it's just interesting, and teams can really take advantage of that. So defensively, I expect to see from Clemson really a 3-3-5 look all game long. So when they present that, can Pitt check to a draw? Can Pitt try to run against having, a limited number of defensive linemen out there?
Yeah, and Pitt is coming off of their best defensive performance of the season by far, only allowing 7 points to Virginia Tech, although it's a Virginia Tech offense that has had these moments this year. We also cover the West Virginia Mountaineers, who are having the exact opposite type of season to Pitt this year over in the Big 12, and West Virginia was able to defeat Virginia Tech. That offense with Tech also sluggish against the Mountaineers, not a team having success this year. So it shows that, is it Virginia Tech just having a little bit less than what people thought out of their offense, or is it Pitt defense stepping up? Pitt, though, 28-7 against Tech. That's a big deal defensively, more so than even offensively, emerging with a running back there with 140 yards on the ground. A big deal for Pitt as well. What you need to see, that's why actually I said in our postgame show, those two things happening, it's a bigger deal than anything Kenny Pickett did, because they need those things, the running game, they need the defense to click in order for them to make this a special year outside of Pickett just throwing stats up there. But they also are coming off of Pickett. And this is hard to say, he had a solid game still, they won, but 203 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. It wasn't as gaudy as it's been. Certainly not a Heisman performance, even though it was good enough for them to win. So if you really want to make this even more special, you do need maybe even a little bit more out of Pickett, although I doubt he'll be the problem in this game. Now, as we get you out of here with this, obviously former captain there at Clemson, obviously you're following Clemson as much as the rest of the conference. Of course, it's a 4-2 Clemson team right now. They have lost to North Carolina State, of course, losing to the top team in the country to open up the year. Dabo's saying he recruits the best of them. He's created a dynasty there. They were right there with Alabama and then some, and of course winning national titles and beating Bama. But this year's not that season. They're fighting for a top 25 ranking, let alone fighting for a playoff spot. What has kind of happened for anyone who doesn't follow other teams, maybe just a Pitt fan following this Pitt team? What has happened to this Clemson team this year? What is different about this Clemson team this year? And is this just an anomaly where they can get right back in there in the top 4 next year, maybe even in the preseason predictions, they'll be right back in the playoff race? Or does Dabo need to get back to work to build this back up again?
Yeah, well, I think the most obvious thing is Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne are in the NFL and in the same team. I think it's truly coming to light how special those two players were. They were just erasers. They erased problems. If there was a lapse in protection, or if there was a lapse in play calling or run blocking, those guys fixed it. I mean, they were so good. And Pitt fans remember Travis Etienne, 75 yards, first play of the game. Of an ACC championship. That's how good, in a rainstorm. I mean, by the way, that those guys were just so good. I think Clemson fans, number one, took them for granted. I think college football took those guys for granted. When you look at national awards, big time awards, those guys not sniffing any of them, they matter, and they were daggum good. And I think that Clemson's feeling that. And to be quite honest, when you look at the offensive struggles this year, it's honestly, one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen, Mike, because of the just different guys on different pages at different times. It truly is one or two guys every other play just not executing.
They're lucky they're not 2-4. They're honestly lucky they're not 2-4.
Yeah, easily. Yeah. And it's so interesting to hear some people say, oh, it's the coordinator, you got to get him out. Oh, it's the quarterback, you got to get a new one. Oh, no, it's the offensive line, you need new guys. It's all of it. It truly is at different times. And you can sit here and we can go through the Syracuse tape and I can point out where it is each and every time. And that's what's so frustrating, I think, to these fans, is that they've seen glimpses, they've seen flashes of, oh my goodness, this is what this team could be. And then they shoot themselves in the foot 4 straight times. And whether it's a turnover or don't score or, can't get a conversion. And it's just so frustrating and honestly baffling because that we're seeing this. But I think it is so mental. I think there is a piece of it that there could be this aha moment. I truly think that, because of the skill and talent that they have, but will it ever come? Will it take a true offseason to figure that out? And so to answer the back end question, I mean, they'll be right back. I think, if it's with a different quarterback or with DJ figuring it out, they're built for a storm like this. And honestly, it's interesting to see how, folks will have a down year and how do they respond? That's the biggest thing. What will this do for Clemson moving forward? Yeah.
I bet you the man who's least surprised by this season for Clemson, not that he didn't know this team was going to be good still and has talent there, obviously, is probably Dabo Swinney. He probably knew, okay, you have a certain ceiling, you lose Trevor Lawrence, you lose so much talent. This could happen. It could be a possibility, where a lot of Clemson fans, I'm sure, are a little slapped in the face by, oh my God, this isn't just every time you wake up in the morning, we have a Heisman candidate quarterback. What's going on? There was a day of Clemson not being this Alabama equivalent.
That's right. That's right. And he sees it every day. And I will tell you something that I'm sure was conflicting to those guys in spring and preseason was the defense was so good. And those guys have faced a ton of injuries. They are not the same defense that we saw line up against Georgia. Still very good and still elite, but not the same. But going against those guys every day and not having Travis, not having Trevor, you probably wonder, okay, is our defense that good? Or is our offense bad, or a combination of both? And I think that's hard to really assess going against every day. And now, they're finding out, okay, our offense is not what it's been, and we've got to continue to figure things out.
Yeah. You want to win a national championship, you take Pitt's offense and Clemson's defense. Even
Undefeated
Clemson's defense right now, and maybe certainly if Clemson was fully healthy, that would be an undefeated powerhouse. That'd be a top 4 team right now. Yeah, it's kind of a tale of two stories here. And I'm sure Clemson also, with the offense they've had in recent years, probably are saying to themselves, man, it's almost annoying to have a 14-8 game, even if you get out of it with a victory, that it's just, man, it's weird to not have the offense show up for Clemson. But as you said, there could be that aha moment. I'm sure Pitt fans are fully aware that it could be against them. And maybe this is the moment for Clemson, that it's the first time all year where they're going into a game after week 1 where they know the opponent might be closer to their level. I'm not saying they're sleeping on teams. Obviously, Dabo's won a national title. He's not going to do that. But it might maybe get them up for a game against Pitt, a division leader, a team that could win the conference, that could take over for them, a veteran quarterback who maybe is a Heisman candidate, whereas that might not have been the case in their thought process for Syracuse. You're human. They might have had that scenario go on. Well, Eric, I definitely appreciate the time for sure. Can I get you to give a prediction? Do you have a prediction for this game? Do you have a final score? with a pick here.
Numbers wise, I tell you what, man, it's hard to predict this just because
it is. It could go either way.
Clearly, Pitt's so good, offensively and done a lot of crazy things with the ball and scoring. Clemson obviously not letting many people score a bunch of points. I will go ahead and tell you this, though. I do think Pitt's going to win the game. I think that they are going to, take this next step as a program and as Kenny as a quarterback. I think he's going to have a career day. It might not be numbers wise, but execution and leadership wise, I think Kenny is going to be out to prove that I am a first round quarterback. I am going to start in the NFL, and it starts right here Saturday when the Tigers come to the Steel City.
Okay. Can we do an over under 30? Do you think we're going to get 30 combined points?
Maybe? Over 30, but I think the line is like 48. I'm going to go under that. I think it's under 48 for sure.
Okay. Because the reason why I asked it that way is that's probably the score and the number of 30, 35 if Clemson's going to win. So if you're getting into the 48, if you're getting into the 40 plus, you would imagine Pitt is getting a victory because unlike, say, Western Michigan, when they lost that game, you're probably figuring that if Pitt can throw up 28 like they did against Tech, you knew early in that game Tech was just not going to score enough no matter what went on.
Right.
It almost feels like Clemson's offense maybe doesn't have enough to hang with Pitt. I do also think Pitt wins this game, but you never know with Pitt either. And there does feel like maybe there's just a waiting period for that hiccup that will come. Last question. Do you think there's a game this year that could be Pitt's hiccup? Do you have anything on the schedule remaining? And if you looked at it, Miami's still there, even though they've been very vulnerable and lost to Virginia. Is there a game on that schedule that even if they get Clemson, have the big moment, Kenny Pickett proves to the NFL, he's a leader, they're ready, that there could be a season ruiner, a game ruiner?
Yeah, I hope they already had it. I hope Western Michigan is that
could be it.
And they say, hey, look, we're good. We're locked in. I'll tell you one game that I have circled about 100 times outside of this Clemson game. It is November 20th. Brennan Armstrong, Kenny Pickett, the two of the best quarterbacks in the ACC. I cannot wait to watch that. Now, I still think Pitt is a better overall team, but just the quarterback duel that can be, it's going to be one for the ages. I hope it's kind of that instant classic type deal. But man, that's going to be a really fun game to watch. And maybe, the battle for the first team ACC quarterback. Whoever wins that gets the nod. I'm leaning Kenny, so y'all know how I am. But, it's going to be a fun one. That's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, you got Kenny right now, but nobody wins an award here at this point. If you don't finish it, if you don't get it done in those big moments the rest of the season, your mid-season award's not gonna look that great on the mantle. I don't know what you're gonna send these guys.
Hey, they remember November, brother. They remember November.
Yeah, it's happened to many teams over the years. Pitt has actually been that team to ruin some seasons for some programs over the years.
Shout out Mark Rick.
Yeah, they don't want to have it happen to them, but they're certainly aware of it occurring. And Clemson wouldn't mind having that aha moment and waking up. And Pitt will still play some talented teams, and maybe North Carolina, a team like that, might actually be the best offense that Pitt will face. Maybe that is going to be the true test for Pitt's defense, maybe even more so than this Clemson game. Eric, thanks for joining me, man. I know we're going to be tuned in. This is definitely a big game this weekend, to say the least. Potentially has all the cards that maybe it could be the game of the weekend overall in college football. And there are going to be some national eyes on the Pitt program and on Kenny Pickett in particular. So this is a big moment, certainly, for Pitt, that I don't think Pitt fans, even the most optimistic, thought we were going to be here after that Western Michigan game. That was being called the worst loss in the Narduzzi era, which was hard to argue at that point. It could have ruined the year, but they have clawed themselves back into, once again, a national situation and a big game and everything in front of them. So, Eric, I definitely appreciate the time.
No doubt, brother. Thanks for having me. Maybe a little ACC preview right here, championship game. If they get to that point, we'll have to do this again, man. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We'll do this again, maybe even a game prior to that. And that'll be maybe a chance that Kenny Pickett and Pitt will get to have revenge for what did happen last time they won the Coastal and got there. And that was a behemoth of a Clemson team. That was a game that Kenny Pickett, because I've saw some people put this up. Oh, well, Kenny Pickett turned around against Clemson. I don't know if it's really fair. It was a rainstorm. Yeah, I don't know if it's really rain. Come on. He was 8 for 14. That was just the best defense ever. Don't worry about it. It was a rainstorm. Yeah, you can say rainstorm. You can say best defense ever. Yeah, you're former Clemson captain, so there might be some bias there at the end. But we definitely appreciate the time, man, for sure. No doubt, buddy. Thank you. Absolutely.
Eric Mac Lain joining me there. Great conversation with him. Fun guy for sure. Glad to do that. Eric Mac Lain, former Clemson captain, as I said, college football analyst for the ACC Network. You saw it in his t-shirt. And, of course, the mothership ESPN. It's a big game. I don't think anyone can doubt that. He seems to think Pitt's going to win, that Pitt's going to do what they need to do, that Kenny Pickett's going to show up, and this Pitt team is going to show up. And, of course, they need to. Yeah, this is a down Clemson team. But Clemson could easily have that aha moment, as Eric said, and have that talent show up and ruin a year for Pitt. And this is the biggest game Pitt has played this year, maybe the biggest game under Narduzzi, maybe the biggest game for Kenny Pickett. And again, I know they had that ACC title game. I know they won the Coastal before, but no one really thought Pitt had a chance in that game, as we talked about. This is a situation where people really think Pitt could win the conference. Pitt could win the division. Pitt could be the best team in the ACC. And when you have a dynasty of 5+ years, owning your conference, winning national titles, getting in the playoff, vying for national titles every year, even if they're not ranked this year, you know the talent's still there. That's the team to beat. That's the team you want to beat. That's the team you want to prove it against before you get to the rest of the schedule. So I also think Pitt's going to win the game. I honestly do. I also think Pitt's going to win this game. I don't know about 48 combined. I don't know about any of that. I do think Pitt wins this. I do think Pitt hangs more into the similar to the Virginia Tech game, maybe a 26, 28, 30 situation. Maybe I'll go, 30, 16. I think Pitt wins handily. I don't think Clemson's offense can do it. I don't think Clemson's offense is good. I think Pitt's offense is way too much for Clemson, even with their defense. It's tough as their defense is. But I think Pitt's going to win this. I think Kenny Pickett's going to show up. I think he's going to even be better than against Tech. I think the defense will give them enough, even if they certainly aren't as good as the other side of the football in their counterpart, at least talent-wise. And I don't think Kenny Pickett's going to make the mistakes. I think that's the problem. You're still seeing 0 interceptions, even if his stats aren't as gaudy. I don't think he's going to make the mistakes. He's a leader of men. And I think Pitt will get this win. You have to watch, though. North Carolina, Miami, even with their talent, despite losing, there could be a hiccup later on down the line. But I think Pitt gets through this one and proves they do belong to the big boys in the ACC this year, even if it's a down year for the conference. And Kenny Pickett absolutely, regardless of everything else, belongs as a member of the Heisman watch list, as a Heisman candidate. He's not going to win it, but even to be a candidate, great for Mark Whipple, great for the Pitt program. And this is different than when Larry Fitzgerald was a legit candidate. Pitt can really promote this on social media, etc. So obviously fantastic for Pitt. Great conversation there with Eric again. Thanks again to Eric Mac Lain, former Clemson captain, analyst with the ACC Network and ESPN. Pitt, Clemson, 3:30 Saturday. Enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy it. Eric's going to enjoy it. It's a win for college football, no matter who actually wins on the scoreboard. But I think Pitt's going to do it. Eric seems to think Pitt's going to do it. Are too many thinking Pitt's going to do it that it makes you actually concerned?